Word Balloon, celebrating 16 years of excellence for you.
Details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for another episode of Kinescope, where we took a look back at the early years of live television. John Suttress here, Ian Brill here, Gabe Hardman here, and we're really excited today to be talking about an incredible Rod Serling, John Frankenheimer drama. That's The Comedian, starring Mickey Rooney, Mel Torme, and Kim Hunter, among others, and Edmund O'Brien, of course.
Yeah, Edmund O'Brien is almost like the co-lead in this. Look, I'm just gonna I think this is brilliant. Okay, so I'm just gonna be I'm not, I'm just gonna end up saying a lot of really positive things about this thing. But like, it's also, this particular episode is kind of the reason I wanted to do this show. It's the episode that got me the most excited about live TV. I think that if anybody watches it, they can kind of see why. It's just it's a kind of perfect storm of talent and everybody coming together to do something, an ambitious script and mount it in a very ambitious way. The way it's shot, the way it's so dynamic and interesting, and Frankenheimer really goes for it, and it is just a really exciting piece of television. And I think if you don't watch any other of these things, I would watch this one because it's just really fascinating stuff. What do you think about it?
Absolutely, man. I agree. I mean, like you said, powerhouse talent in front of the camera and behind the camera as well. It's John Frankenheimer and Rod Serling, but also Rod Serling adapting an Ernest Lehman story, which is fantastic.
Yeah, have you read the story? Because I have not. I wasn't able to get my hands on it.
No, I didn't have time to read the story. But I mean, certainly Ernest Lehman's pedigree didn't he write Sweet Smell of Success?
Yeah, and actually there's a weird kind of meta tie into Sweet Smell of Success in this episode too, with the publicist character who actually is also a character in Sweet Smell of Success. But this is so. I mean, we should probably kind of lay out what the story is. It's a sort of basically feature length. Playhouse 90 is a 90-minute show, and it's about the behind the scenes machinations of a Milton Berle or Jackie Gleason style comedy variety show. Yep. But Mickey Rooney plays a sort of tyrannical lead actor, comedian, star of the show, and he is sort of constantly oppressing his brother, played by Mel Torme, and in a surprising role for Mel Torme, because I don't believe he did a lot of acting work at this point, and they went out on a limb with him, and but it's also the story of Edmund O'Brien as the sort of comedy writer who has run out of ideas, run out of steam, and has to and kind of stoops to stealing material from a dead war buddy in order to get this big spectacular that they're putting on. The episode that they're putting on is a 90-minute show, like a 90-minute special, right? So which kind of reflects the running time of the whole show.
Yeah, that's funny because you're right. I guess it might be a special. I assumed it was like a weekly show. And
I think that it is a weekly show, but they talk about it in the context of the show. I'm pretty sure they talk about it being like a special episode that they're doing, like a longer special episode that they're doing.
Well, and you're right,
comic-tacular or whatever.
Yeah, and you're right. Because they say I think his regular show is a 30-minute show, and this is a 90-minute one.
Yeah.
Incredible camera innovations, and including this shot right at the beginning where they're doing a dry run of the show, and you see Mickey there on the monitor. And kind of an odd little freeze frame that I managed to grab, but essentially chewing out the cast and the crew about how lousy the show is.
Right, and that's his introduction, right? His introduction is on a television monitor within the context of this TV thing. They, production-wise, they were able to. One of the reasons that they were able to do such ambitious camera work in this is that they didn't have to move the cameras out of the way. The cameras in the show are the cameras they're shooting the show with, right? They're shooting Playhouse 90 with, right? So and the cameramen riding on the cameras are the cameramen as well, right? It's not so there's that lack of distinction and that kind of what you would think of as a kind of meta quality now also was kind of birthed out of just necessity, but they were also in Television City in Hollywood. They had a lot more room and equipment and technology to play with than the people back in New York did, and so they really went for it.
Yeah, Ian, opening thoughts on the show?
It is mind-boggling to watch this and know it's happening live and not just wonder how everyone didn't drop dead as soon as they finished this, because there are close-ups with the camera zooming in. There's rear projection when they're like going to a cafe, and it's like, oh, we're going to a they're like, there's lots of sets in this, way like a lot. And when you realize it's happening in real time, you're like, it's not, they're not cutting. They're not in an edit room. It's like, it's live. You're just, you wonder how they did it with so few mistakes. Although if you listen to John Frankenheimer's commentary, he notices like these camera mistakes. Like you can kind of see where cameras don't quite follow a body as fast as it should, but it's like, just that level. There's no like flubs or anything, considering the crazy amount of dialogue. Like it is just it's funny when we talk about performances, we're talking about acting performances, but I do think the technical work, camera work, and also I think sound work, the fact that like a lot of noise isn't on the soundtrack when all these stuff is moving, I consider those like a performance that goes into this, because it's what makes this successful. It's how it's pulled off,
and because it's all happening at the same time, they're all integrated. They're all part of the same thing, right? It's theater and filmmaking and everything happening all at the same time, all live, all choreographed. Just like for a little bit of context on Playhouse 90, because this is the first one that we've talked about. It went on for 4 seasons. It was to some extent it grew out of the show Climax that we covered an early episode of last week, where Martin Manulis, the producer of that show, worked with John Frankenheimer and Rod Serling a lot on Climax, and they kind of legitimized that show. And when they went on to Playhouse 90, which was Playhouse 90 is is basically like the last great live TV series.
Agreed.
It kind of closed things out. It's 1956 to late 1959 or 60, and it's and it crosses the line where videotape comes in. Videotape wasn't like invented or perfected or whatever until 1956, and they didn't start using it until 1958. And once tape really came in, that was the end of live TV, really, because you could, shoot stuff and edit it and have more control. but but this this was also kind of the most prestigious show in a lot of ways. It's years later it would still be a show that people would talk about as one of the best TV shows ever. And so a lot of that is it's we're getting all of like the best people and the and like the best talent, and they're and they're all kind of jammed into this show, which is a huge show, had a big budget relative to all the others. People got paid money. It was they had rehearsal time. They had a 16-day rehearsal period with like 12 days on in a rehearsal stage, 4 days rehearsing with the cameras. It's a big production. It's like making like a feature for live television.
Absolutely. I wondered that because the only way you could do this would be with that much rehearsal time. 16 days. That's unheard. No one in television could do that now. Because like if like this was a movie, like this would take maybe a month to shoot or something like that. But to make it because by the way, this is like an hour and 13 minutes long. It's without
commercials. Yeah.
And so I can understand like that much. That much rehearsal just being so important. And like you said, like camera rehearsal, like it's almost like choreography. Like it'd be like choreographing like dancers.
It is, except that the camera is a giant machine that if it runs into you, bust your face open. Like you were talking about the camera zooming in on people, and like in technical terms, it's not zooming in. It's the camera is physically moving towards people. There's a shot that's barreling right in on Mickey Rooney, and like it would just taken his head off if they didn't stop at the exact right moment, right? So
as I understood it, hearing Frankenheimer and Lumet in interviews about Playhouse 90, they usually had 3 productions running at the same time in terms of rehearsal, blocking, and then the show that's actually going to air. So that's why there was breathing room for such a long process of getting it all ready and getting ready for the live production.
Right.
So that's a huge help. And
go ahead.
What I was going to say is, again, these are the top creatives was chosen for Playhouse 90 because, like its counterpart at NBC Studio One, this was a prestige show for CBS.
Yeah, and so John Frankenheimer, who directed this, and went on to have a long, sometimes great, sometimes debacle of a career, but great director, right? And he was basically the house director for Playhouse 90. He directed 27 episodes of it, I think. And he got to everybody involved in this. Like it was a weird situation for television, because certainly much different from television now, where where directors are mostly just sort of functionaries that are pushed around by by showrunners and stuff, and not really driving creative forces. In this, Martin Emanuelis was the producer, but like the directors got to choose their material. They got to push for scripts that they wanted and choose scripts that they wanted and develop things that, stories that they wanted to tell. And I mean, I think that has a huge impact on how vital the show is. I mean, Arthur Penn did the miracle worker for this initially before the movie version of it. And that was like a passion project for him that he had a hard time getting on any other show. And so, it's just, like an enormous amount of creativity went into all of this as well, and they had the room to do it, which is a bizarre thing for television.
There's a great anecdote that Frankenheimer tells on his Emmys oral history interview about specifically Playhouse 90. I don't remember the name of the teleplay, but he and Martin Emanuelis came out to Television City initially for Playhouse 90, and the first script was this terrible script. And Emanuelis to the executives is like, I don't know what you guys are thinking, but this is crap and I'm not doing it, and walked off. And Frankenheimer, who had already, as we said, had been doing things like Climax and other half-hour shows, like, I'm walking off too. And the executives are like, Martin Emanuelis has the clout to do that. You work for us. Shut up. Fix the script if you want to, but you're directing this piece of shit whether you like it or not.
Right.
And Frankenheimer was like, all right, that's where I was in my career. But I do want to point out,
mind you, he was 26 years old when they started this, right? Like he was 26 years old when he directed this thing. It's insane.
Well, and also going back to this great shot of both, the monitor and what's going on live as well. That was echoed as if you're a film buff. One of Frankenheimer's best early films was the original 1962 Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra, Angela Lansbury, and why am I blanking on Inspector Luger? James Gregory. And that's a very McCarthy-esque kind of public scene. This exact thing happens again. Yeah. And you can see Angela watching James Gregory, and behind him, there's the live shot of Gregory, even with the TV cameras going on, ironically NBC at this point. But yeah, I mean, that's what's amazing. These kind of things were developed on TV, and they're used in film.
And the way most people remember this, and people talk about this, the frames within frames, and using the television monitor to tell a more complex story within the frame in Manchurian Candidate. But it really came out of this show, right? Like it's very clearly this was the inspiration for that.
Absolutely. Another innovation that I love were shots like this, where using the mirror, and really having again this kind of double thing. This is taking those limitations of a live studio shoot and figuring out ways of deepening the visuals and everything. No, again,
and telling the story in an aggressive, like gutsy way that works with the material, right? This material is, I mean, like one of the most exciting things about live TV to me is the way that the performances can really go for it. I mean, we haven't even talked about Mickey Rooney yet, but he gives the biggest performance you could imagine, which is also exactly appropriate for the tone of this show, right? Yes. And it's kind of crazy the way that he pulls that off and how great he is in this thing, right? And I think that if he was giving that performance in front of a film camera, if he was giving that performance on on a film TV show or in a feature, and we've seen him give performances that don't fit the material in other stuff, right? But it's like this is his home. This is where he can be as great as he could be,
John, do you have a picture of that great scene? I'm still flabbergasted how they shot it, where they're in the director's booth, and then he's on the floor, and then the director is talking to him on the.
No, the coolest is the monitor shot that that we started with. This shot.
Yeah, but
there's something that's sort of like that where they're in the director's booth, and then he's on the floor and he's talking up, like yelling up to them, and it's so like you're seeing two levels at once, and he's literally small. He's always the smallest actor in the room, but also now he's literally small, but he's still berating these guys.
Yeah, tyrannical, absolutely.
But also like really pretty crazy for the time to go with something where any character would be that small in the frame of a television, for television, because people are watching this on like a 12-inch TV or something, right? Like, so, I mean, but it's not like we have any a lack of close-ups in this either, though. I mean, we get right in people's faces. We go for it. It's like, and there are moments, there are these moments where, that are as big as this thing gets. There are also very intimate moments, even with Mickey Rooney, where he comes way down and we're really close in on him, and he plays those as well. Everybody in the cast is amazing. I mean, Mel Torme, I think he did a very admirable job. He's the weakest link in this, but everybody in this does incredible work.
Well, they're all. I mean, again, no heroes in this, much like Patterns.
This is why I like these things, right? Because there aren't fucking heroes in them.
That is also, again, just like Serling in our first episode, as we explored Patterns, is going after corporate America. Here he's going literally after the hand that feeds him, and that is network television and the stress behind it. And also Lehman, and correct me, guys, if my memory is wrong. but either Lehman interviewed Milton Berle or was inspired by a Milton Berle interview. But I would also say, and as far as, because Milton was very tough on his crews, literally would wear like a gym whistle and constantly blowing it. In fact, true story, Milton Berle had a stage show that he did at Illinois State University when I was there. And my roommate was one of the chief tech guys. And this is in the 80s, literally 30 years later from this period, and still had the whistle. But my guy was like, yeah, but in a good way. My roommate was like, this guy knew exactly what he wanted, from key lighting to lenses, so that, because it was projected on a big screen. And, no, I need to stand here and he goes, thoroughly professional. Yeah, he was tough, but sometimes a crew needs that. So that was interesting. But the other thing I've always heard too is that another comedian that you would never suspect to be an asshole, Red Buttons. Red Buttons had a notorious variety show that went through comedy writers like Toilet Paper, and big like Mel Brooks and Larry Gelbart, and really big comedy names of the time. And Red was on for 2 seasons. The first season was a critical success, Man of the Year for TV, and he was canceled the next season because he burned everybody out from being such an asshole.
From the notes, this is from the booklet that comes with the Criterion set. The notes say the genesis of the fictional story was writer-journalist Ernest Lehman's observation in the studio of Texaco Star Theater while working on a magazine article. And in 1952, he transmitted his notes about live television into a novelette. So was Milton Berle Texaco? Was that it?
Yep, that was the show. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking of the comedy writers, Edmund O'Brien's character is is the head writer, the head comedy writer on the show, and he's beleaguered and he's worn out and he's just out of ideas, and I think we talked a little bit before on our Patterns episode about how Rod Serling, was never had like the confidence in himself and his writing that he probably deserved, and he would and clearly this is Serling putting himself. I mean, he wrote that that Velvet Alley play that was basically an autobiographical thing, but clearly he's connecting with this idea of the writer who's out of ideas, the insecurity of that, and the pressure to produce something for a show that's going to go live, and you have no choice but to to provide material for it.
No question.
I do wonder if the part of the psychology of this, and this might also be from Serling's life, is his generation's survivor's guilt of being in World War II,
yes,
and surviving it, coming back, living this life in the 50s, living a much, a lot of them were living a much more higher income, higher class life than they had come. And so in this story, Edmund O'Brien is a writer. He keeps some scripts from a writer who died in World War II. And he copies them for this, and I wonder if that's if that's a little bit of this just survivor's guilt. Like this guy, this wonderful writer, Davy Farber is his name, who wrote these great sketches. Who knows what he would have been today? But he was killed in Normandy, and so now Edmund O'Brien, Al is that his name? He's a fraud now, and he can only rip off Davy Farber, this war hero.
Yeah, and I think that's a really effective way to put to take those feelings, that presumably I mean, it seems that Serling definitely had, right, and or at least just from interviews and stuff like that, and and dramatize them, put them into something, put the shit that you're going through, the bad feelings you have, and all that stuff, put it in something and make it work. I mean, I think that's a great thing.
And it really was part of the cultural zeitgeist at the moment, when not only in Patterns and in this, but the man in the gray flannel suit had that same kind of vibe of survivor's guilt regarding World War II. Best Years of Our Lives, which I was
well, sure, yeah, that's very directly about it.
Immediately after the war.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, no, it was definitely part of it.
Yeah, I mean, and also Edmund O'Brien, I think we can't he doesn't give as showy a performance as the showiest performance that ever lived that Mickey Rooney gives, but Edmund O'Brien is great in this, right? He kind of carries the episode in so many ways.
Yeah,
and
he's the through line character to every conflict in the story.
Because a big crux of the story is that the beleaguered brother of the star, Mel Torme, gets his hands on the script and tries to blackmail Edmund O'Brien's character into killing the Mickey Rooney's monologue, and the monologue is always about belittling and making fun of his brother, his no account brother, right? But the no account brother is actually there and spends his life trying to support Mickey Rooney while also just in this abusive cycle of Rooney treats him unbelievably horribly and then tenderly gives him a watch for his anniversary, and it's just a cycle of that sort of abusive cycle of treating him unbelievably horribly, luring him back in, and that cycle is not broken by the end of this thing, even if there's a cathartic moment for Mel Torme's character later on.
A softer echo of this story that's played out in the 90s is in the Billy Crystal movie, Mr. Saturday Night, where he's the asshole comic, and the great character actor David Paymer plays his brother, who's kind of, not as pathetic as Mel's character is in this. I mean, this really does play to a lot of extremes, which is great, and again, to great effect. I love the gossip columnist that they're all afraid of, by another great character actor and a name that you would expect from a cleaning appliance. It's Whit Bissell every time.
And Whit Bissell's character is the one who also is portrayed in Sweet Smell of Success. So there is an Ernest Lehman cinematic universe going on here.
Absolutely. And, the fear is, first of all, that will he discover that the material is stolen? Is Lester, is Mel Torme's character Lester going to go to him with that story? But ultimately we discover, and another great character actor, the wonderful Kim Hunter, playing Lester's wife, kind of tough on Lester for being such a doormat to his brother. But then we find out, and this is kind of the aftermath of that she cannot even resist the power of Mickey Rooney's character.
Mickey Rooney.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, hey, this is apparently borne out in real life. So I don't know if we, he had a lot of, a lot of wives.
8 wives, and no disrespect to any of them, but several of them, including Ava Gardner. So Mickey did just fine.
There's a bit. I mean, Gabe? You watched the part from the '80s PBS show about this, where they interview Mickey Rooney, they interview Frankenheimer. Carl Reiner hosts it.
Yeah.
There's a bit like 3 minutes of that documentary where John Frankenheimer is like, I'd go to lunch with Mickey, and he'd come back with a blonde on his arm, and he'd come up to me and he'd say, "Hey, John, you got a part for her in this?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, sure." And then the next day he'd come up and now he has a redhead on his arm, and he comes up to me and he says, "John, you got a part for her?" I'm like, "Okay, that's apparently all the chorus girls you see in the back."
Yes.
And then they go to Mickey Rooney, 1983 Mickey Rooney, and he goes, "Yes, I'll cop to that. I love women, and I believe they should be cultivated, cared for like a flower."
Yeah, that cultivated really goes over well these days. Yeah, but
his autobiography is filled with, and it's so weird because it was written after he was born again. And forgive the air quotes, everybody, but despite being born again, in his autobiography, it's a tell-all and a lot of conquests, needless to say. So, yeah, way to go, Mick.
Yeah, he also is, he was a little guy. Presumably he's compensating for some things. But
he was a good-looking guy,
Yeah, no, look, no offense to the guy. He's just like he was, but he was also a guy who, he he was a 9-decade career in show business, right? He started as a tiny child in vaudeville. His first silent film was he was 6 years old. He did the Andy Hardy series, which was like a series of kind of, light comedy program or things that went on for years. But the first one he did when he was 16 years old. And then World War II, he went off. He served in a sort of entertainment capacity. And when he came back, he was like an adult who was 5'2", and basically there was no place for him anyplace. He wasn't like the juvenile anymore. He wasn't, he couldn't really play adult roles, and so he ended up in lower budget, kind of, crime movies, noir movies, and stuff like that, and but had endless peaks and valleys through this guy's career. He worked literally forever.
Well, like you said, from vaudeville and those Mickey Moran silent films to the Night at the Museum movies.
Yeah, right.
He's one of the guards with Dick Van Dyke in it.
Dick Van Dyke, yeah.
And I mean, Frankenheimer goes way out of his way to say that Mickey Rooney is the greatest actor he's ever worked with, right? And it's hard to accept that, given the Mickey Rooney of it all, but it also, he is really, really amazing in this episode. He could
do anything. He could do anything. He was great dancing and singing with Judy Garland in the 30s, and he was, a good comedic actor. Boys Town, an incredible performance, rubbing up against Spencer Tracy, who won an Oscar for that movie. And I mean, really, again, you needed a contrast character like Whitey, the character that Rooney plays, to, again, what he was able to do in his later years, from the schmaltz of the Black Stallion to
I like the Black
Museum.
I think that it's just that he's one of those guys that, just from my perspective, growing up, I see interviews with this guy. I see him doing. I just always thought of him as the most disgusting, smarmy little guy that I could imagine. Right? I thought of him as a repulsive character. I don't know if that's fair, but that's just the way that that's just my feeling about it at the time. So it's a big revelation to see him in this thing where he really is, you can just see the talent and see just him bringing everything to it.
No question. He, I always loved when Dana Carvey and he were in a TV show together.
Yes. Nathan Lane was also in it.
Right. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but Carvey would make fun of Rooney, and it's like, I was the number one star in the world. Man. And it's true though. He was. Those Andy Hardy movies were beloved. They were the sitcoms of their day. They were the programmer movies, as Gabe described. And there were 16 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ridiculous how popular these were. And they all featured young, up-and-coming MGM stars, Lana Turner and, of course, Judy Garland. I mean, and right now I'm blanking on others. But it really is this amazing list of MGM starlets that later became bigger stars and stuff. And yeah, that's just, so he really was the biggest star in the world, and you can appreciate that. And again, he and Wallace Beery, he and Spencer Tracy, all the great stars of the day had roles or movies with him or hung out with him. And yeah, or he's in the original Midsummer's Night's Dream. He played as a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So
my introduction, I think maybe like a lot of people who grew up in the 90s, was his appearance on The Simpsons. In the Radioactive Man episode, he's brought in as this Milhouse is playing Fallout Boy. And when Milhouse doesn't want to play the character anymore, Mickey Rooney is brought in as this child actor expert. He's literally helicoptered in, and he tells Milhouse and Bart, I was the biggest star from 1939 to 1940. And Bart goes, wow, spanning 2 decades.
That's a great joke. That's hilarious.
Outstanding.
So, we've been talking about how intense this play is, and how crazy they go with the camera and the performances and all this sort of stuff. Well, according to John Frankenheimer, 4 days before this show was going to go live, there was another, a Studio One that Robert Allen Arthur wrote, who wrote a lot of live TV, went on, I believe he wrote All That Jazz later. And but it was pretty good. Like, it was a good episode. And so Frankenheimer got really worried that maybe this was redundant or they wouldn't be able to deliver something. And so he just came in and was like, we gotta like make this like that much better. We got to make it as good and interesting and just, go for it on a level that they wouldn't normally, just because he felt pushed by this other episode and didn't want to come in looking like, second best to something. And I think that entirely shows in it. But he also said that, that this was like, the aired show was the great version of this, right? That they had a dress rehearsal that was okay, but everything didn't quite land. They had an earlier rehearsal that was a disaster, and this one is just the one where everything really came together. And it was, I mean, that's luck, but it's presumably also just people leveling up because it's the real deal. But I think that's so much what this live TV stuff is about. It's this ephemeral thing that could be brilliant or a total disaster, and they had no idea until they're there on the stage. Yeah.
I also love, as we've and depending on what kind of television watcher you are, there's the Dick Van Dyke Show, and this really is kind of the reverse image of the Dick Van Dyke Show, because you have tyrannical Alan Brady on that, Carl Reiner. But look at the comparisons of Edmund O'Brien and Dick Van Dyke's character, Rob Petrie. So,
yeah, I mean, I have to say about. Go ahead, Gabe.
No, go ahead.
One thing we have to say about Edmund O'Brien: not only does he deliver a great performance, but you have to realize he's literally running from scene to scene. Like, so if there's a scene that he's in, and then he's in the next scene, that means he ran from one set to another, and also he's not. Doesn't appear out of breath, even though he might be in real life. If I had to do it, I'd be saying my lines like, and then Davy Farber wrote, give me a sec.
No, I know. Yeah,
I'm imagining, like, what if he tripped on something?
Yeah, I know. The Frankenheimer points out this specific scene with the Whit Bissell character playing Otis Elwell is the columnist, and they have this scene where I think Whit Bissell just basically like turns into a close-up, and Whit Bissell's character is delivering his line to nobody, because Edmund O'Brien had run out of there as soon as he was off camera to get into the next scene to sit down next to Mickey Rooney.
That also says a lot about the other actor, because it's difficult to act against, to say your lines when the other actor is literally running away from you.
Yeah.
You're still in character. That takes commitment.
I wondered if Rooney, when they were showing the variety show in a montage sequence, I wasn't sure, and I couldn't tell from the Kinescope I was watching on YouTube, and I didn't remember. I've got the DVD set somewhere boxed away. But if that stuff was shot live, or was that all film?
Wait, which part are we talking about? The
when they're actually doing like the montage
with the audience and the
the audience was clearly film, and the laughter was canned, and I thought that was appropriate, because it almost, in a meta sense, showed like almost that treadmill to oblivion sort of thing.
Well, also there's just no room for an audience in there. But
specifically like a room on stage, because he had a few quick change costume moments if they were doing it live.
I think it seemed to me, and Ian, you watched the Frankenheimer thing commentary as well, where for the most part he just sat there and like criticized camera 2 for not hitting his marks over and over again.
He kept talking about he had 3 cameramen and 2 of them were great.
Yes, exactly. And then this was recorded in 1995, and he's still obsessed with this with the 1 weak cameraman who missed his fucking marks a couple of times, but which is kind of hilarious. I mean, like, through that whole thing, he just, he's just, cameraman missed that one. Yep. Like that, his commentary for 3/4 of it is just, criticizing the little listening to the show and criticizing the little moments where the cameraman missed their mark. But
Ed had a couple technical questions. With the camera synced to the monitor scanning rate, how did that affect the capture of the live room performance? I don't know.
I think that they're just, I mean, it's not like you're shooting 35 millimeter film at a TV monitor where they would not sync. I mean, maybe this is outside my 1956 pay grade here. I don't know exactly, how they would, what, I mean, it seems to me likely that they would just be able to shoot the monitor. And it's not like perfect, right? And there's all of that kind of haloing and stuff that goes on.
Right.
They just have to go with it. Yeah.
Right. And much like that Manchurian Candidate photo, it's a little cleaner looking there, but if you were actually watching the movie, it had that same difference of resolution. And frankly, I think that works.
Right. Yeah, and that's shooting 35 millimeter film that you have to then sync to the monitor and whatever. And that, because if you're shooting film and you're shooting a video monitor, it's just and they're not synced together. You just get a giant bar rolling down it and you can't see anything. So yeah.
And also, Ed, and I unfortunately I don't think any of us have the answer to this. How close did this follow the Ernest Lehman novella?
I feel like a bum who has completely fallen down on the job here, but I wasn't able to get a hold of the short story, and we'll do a bonus episode for you when I get it, and we'll just sit here and talk about the novella as well.
I really am curious to read it because again, knowing about Burl and also, I mean, that's the thing. I know Lehman really does leaned on this examination of Burl's show, but I can't believe Red Buttons. And even as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Jackie Gleason was another real tyrant when it came to his writers.
Yeah, I'm sure this is a composite. I mean, I'm sure that the jumping off point was Burl and the time he spent there, and being able to kind of directly observe that stuff. But I'm sure it's a composite. Yeah.
And Jackie Gleason came to the set of this, I believe, is something
really?
Frankenheimer said.
Well,
when he saw Mickey Rooney. I don't know if he said that's me, but he
that's
said,
apparently and according to IMDb, Jack Benny happened to walk in to a rehearsal and saw Rooney berating Mel Torme, and he thought it was real.
Yes,
okay. That was probably
I think Mel Torme tells that story in the documentary, in the PBS thing, like about Benny coming in and thinking that this is like he was, and then basically the idea is that this sold everybody on Torme as an actor because like they were going to cast somebody else. They were on the fence about him. He wasn't he wasn't a strong actor, and not being a strong actor and having to do something as rigorous as this seems absurd. And I think for that he did a really good job.
But he did.
Supposedly at least the print the legend version of it is that Jack Benny walked in and sold everybody on the idea that Mel Torme was so great because he thought that this berating was real.
Yeah. Now wait a minute, fellas. Don Wilson and I never get this bad on my show.
In my version of that story, Mel Torme then slips Jack Benny like a 20. Like,
yes.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The plan worked.
I had forgotten how it ended. I truly, this is one of the reasons why I love that we're doing this, because I have watched a lot of these. I had those box sets of Studio One and the Criterion collection of shows, and watched it back when it was on PBS.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot how it ended, and when Mel shows up during the show and is watching Mickey Rooney go through the monologue and starting to shit on him and stuff, I thought for sure he was going to pull out a gun and shoot him. I really did. I'm like, shades of Joker, if you will. But yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I really thought that was going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, but it's more tragic than that. I mean, he just ends up kind of beating the shit out of him off camera. But then Mickey Rooney, of course, just comes back 2 seconds later and he's the star and he's finishing up the show and whatever. And then, because the show was pulled off so successfully and the Edmund O'Brien's character basically gets to walk off like everything's great, and but the cycle of, the sort of abusive cycle of Mickey Rooney and his Mel Torme brother continues on, and Kim Hunter, the beleaguered wife character, just walks away. Like it's got a 70s movie ending to it. And also all that stuff about the blackmail and everything is actually kind of brilliantly resolved. For something that keeps the story afloat and keeps the sort of an engine for this story. The idea that Edmund O'Brien's writer character had plagiarized this work from this other guy is instantly just kind of eliminated by Mickey Rooney making a phone call and going, no, it's just tell everybody that it's a tribute to this fallen soldier and the work that he did, and that part of it just evaporates. And the way that I think that it's just a really interesting, sophisticated piece of writing where they're able to layer these things and have these multiple payoffs over the course of the end of the show it doesn't feel like things all everything doesn't come exactly to an end at the very, or to a climax at the very end. It does layer these things and does it very deftly, I think.
No question. And again, Serling's run of these incredible stories. I mean, this is only because was Patterns 56, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, Patterns was 50.
And Requiem, it was at the end of 56. This is 57.
Yeah.
So in a really short period of time, I mean, Rod Serling is just shitting out these fucking gems.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are scripts that he wrote at that point that didn't quite work or were hobbled by censors or whatever. But like he is just like, this is the best writing he ever does in these, in a lot of ways the worst circumstances. I mean, just like. But sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you need that level of pressure, and sometimes you just need these incredibly trying circumstances. I mean, obviously they're great Twilight Zones. Obviously he does great stuff after this, but these things are just incredible pieces of work.
Well, and Jeremy Horsley, sorry, real fast, he wanted to say, love this one, not to derail, but do we have any book recommendations about this era of TV? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but what I can suggest is, again, on YouTube, PBS did this incredible look at Serling and American Masters, and it's called Rod Serling Submitted for Your Approval. And you get a lot. There's a great narrator that imitates Serling, and you get a lot of Serling's thoughts on this era of television and things like this and The Velvet Alley and other teleplays, and just talks about, and certainly too, Frankenheimer is on there. And they both really go into detail about the pressure and stress of live television. And man, you really do see the through line between Edmund O'Brien's character and Serling himself, because I mean, the sweat you see on O'Brien's face is indicated by Serling's words and Frankenheimer's observations of Serling next to him in the booth of, every gasp of a blown line or missed camera cue or whatever, that Serling just, years of his life were rubbing off as he was watching these things.
Also, so Jeremy, I do have book recommendations for this. I don't have them in front of me at this moment. So I'm at Gabriel Hardman on Twitter. After we record here, I will, I'll put out those couple of the research books that I've been using for, to just delve into all this sort of stuff.
Sure.
I'll put that out there.
And again, the Television Academy's website that has all these oral history interviews, I keep finding more and more, and it's Frankenheimer, it's Arthur Penn, it's Sidney Lumet. I was watching a great writer-producer, Meta Rosenberg, who started in the early 60s in TV and ended up, working on the Rockford Files and some other big TV shows of the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, there are so many people that have these incredible recollections, and you really do get a great picture of what it was like during this era.
And one of the books I'm going to recommend is an oral history of TV, which is super interesting. So, yeah.
There you go.
All right. So I think that we mostly did this. This I don't have a lot to complain about here, right? Yeah, there's those couple of that fucking camera 2 missed those marks a couple of times. It was horrible, but actually, it contributed to it. That somehow makes it more exciting. I don't know.
We didn't talk much about Kim Hunter and Constance Ford.
Yes.
And really, again, two very strong characters in this story. I mean, certainly Kim Hunter, her own woman, and you do kind of wonder why she is with Mel's character. I mean, she kind of explains it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it is also about inferring that, it's about showing these characters and trying to infer how they could make sense together. But I mean, I thought it was interesting on that sort of PBS documentary from the early 80s that Kim Hunter was like, Rod Serling was a great writer, but I don't think that he had a great grasp of female characters. And I can kind of see that from her point of view when looking at this.
He told her that, like he would have conversations with her about that.
Right. And you can kind of see where she's coming from in this, although I think that within the context of the story, this is also still really effective. So her part is really effective.
Well,
she does an amazing job with it.
She's not, as our friend Kelly Studiconic would describe, a sexy lamp. She's there, and then really, I mean, there's meat to her character.
And everybody in this is compromised. It's not like it's not like there's a bunch of idealized guys, and then and the women are either like you say, a lamp or someone to abuse or whatever. I mean, it is, although I suppose there's a little bit of that in this, but I mean, but it is these are all kind of complex characters who all have things that they want, and all are, and nobody in this is a doormat, but nobody in this is not compromised. Everybody's compromised, and that's like the driver of the drama.
No question. And again, that's why as we were picking this initial list of shows we were going to do, and absolutely, Gabe was like, we got to do The Comedian, and I'm like, no question. But as we were seeing from Patterns and The Comedian, it's like, wow, this is a lot of heavy shit. Let's make sure we hook it up with some light material. Hence James Bond last week. Next week, lots of fun.
Yes. We're going to do No Time for Sergeants next week. Andy Griffith. It was later made into a film. This was sort of the, in some ways the beginning of Griffith's career. And he's a super interesting guy. He was a super smart, talented, interesting guy who had this long, career and did all sorts of things. And, and so I think there's a lot to talk about, but it's also not quite so unbelievably grim and downbeat as all the episodes I love so much. Yeah.
I mean, that's what's going to be fun.
Looking at these things, John's right in that we looked at it and we're like, well, if every week we do something where, which is unrelentingly miserable, it might get a little old, but even I had that thought, right? Like, all I like is unbelievably miserable stuff. So like the fact that it was apparent even to me says something. So I think that it so we're going to try to break it up a little bit. So we have a lighter one next week, and then we'll go back to the misery the following week.
Right, but I do think we're going to alternate back and forth.
Yeah,
and, I mean, we will explore, because really, initially we were just thinking the TV dramas. But it's like, well, wait, there's other interesting things that were happening with live television. So expect a quiz show episode. And a great science fiction show, that Tales of Tomorrow, that, again, what they were able to do with live television is just fascinating. And that'll be another fun one. But Sid Caesar, we were talking about.
Yeah.
We likely will do. I mean, there is a Jackie Gleason teleplay that I would like us to do called The Laugh Maker, which I think is interesting. But also, we should look at The Honeymooners. The Honeymooners, if everyone that's listening or watching doesn't know, those classic 39 episodes, even though they were filmed, they were performed live. And what had happened was the Dumont Network devised this camera that simultaneously shot live television, but also shot film. So and then this was the show that they really tested this camera on. I'm not sure if Gleason is the one that ultimately junked that after 1955, the season that they did that, because those Lost Honeymooner episodes are clearly kinescopes, but they were kinescopes before this camera was developed and after they stopped using it. Maybe it was too expensive to do on Gleason.
Well, if it's a kinescope, it's within our mandate. If it's not, I don't buy it. So we'll have to sort that out.
Well, I think we'll explore the honeymooners, and we could do it with kinescopes. But honestly, the classic 39, I would argue, despite the quality of the film preservation, it is a preservation of a live performance.
All right, look, we'll argue about this off the air, but next week we're doing, No Time for Sergeant. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's Andy Griffith's great. So why would you not want to watch that?
Absolutely. Here, I want to pop up an image. This might be from the film, but there you go.
Yeah.
So, and then really, like Gabe said, this was the beginning of Andy's career, and in a lot of ways, the early template to what became the Andy Griffith Show. So definitely. That's funny. Ed says No Time for Sergeants. Also loved Andy and a Face in the Crowd. I'll save my Face in the Crowd anecdote with someone from the crew of Face in the Crowd for another conversation, maybe next week.
Perhaps next week when we're talking about Andy Griffith. All right. So.
All right, that's all we got, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Ian, any final observation?
If you enjoy the work of Kim Hunter reading off, working from a Rod Serling script, I cannot recommend a certain movie. It's kind of a small movie. Maybe not a lot of people heard of it. Planet of Apes. They worked on that film. That's another collaboration. I think it's wonderful, and everyone should see it. I don't know how many. It's based on a French author, Planet of Apes.
Yeah, John, we should check that out sometime.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe we've stumbled into another episode of. Gotta always bring up the Ape Talk. That's fantastic. So, all right. Thanks everybody for watching. Join us next week for No Time for Sergeants, an Andy Griffith classic, right here on Kinescope. For Ian Brill, Gabe Harbin. Take care, everybody.
Advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a